Thanks. I'd first like to start with introducing John Oldfield. John is a longtime champion of WASH and advocacy efforts on behalf of WASH globally. John has founded and started WASH Advocates, and recently he's been with Global Water 2020 for the past 3 years. And John has been with the consortium as a behind-the-scenes supporter, giving some guidance in the last year as to how we can put together our global advocacy guidelines, and really helping us think through some of the steps for getting to the point where we are today of already receiving some global advocacy proposals, and now really starting to go into those and also designing and coming up with other ideas. So the idea here today was to jumpstart it. But John, would you mind taking just a couple minutes and introducing yourself, a bit of a background on you, please?
Sure. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, John, and your colleagues at the consortium for the opportunity to join you here today. Yeah, as John said, I'm with a group called Global Water 2020, based here in Washington, D.C. It's early, but no complaints. That's one of the risks of being a global citizen. And I'm grateful for 23 people being on board here. That's a testament to the work of the consortium. And I hope it is a testament to the increasing interest in professionalizing advocacy for WASH across the globe. I've been working in WASH advocacy for over 10 years now, at the same time in Washington, D.C., but also at least indirectly in well over a dozen developing countries in Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. My ambition for meetings like this is simply to do what I can to professionalize, and by that I mean literally make a profession of WASH advocacy. I am a professional WASH advocate. My colleagues, 15 of us, and I, this is how we make our living. We are not technical experts. We are advocates doing cooking advocacy campaigns using the same essentially 6 steps that Ramesh and I and others will discuss throughout the next 90 minutes here. I'm involved in advocacy because I think that advocacy, professional advocacy, is the path toward the SDGs. It is the path toward 100% coverage of WASH in schools, in healthcare facilities, in communities, in marketplaces, and so on. And I also think it's the path that has been, let's say, under-recognized, under-capitalized, under-supported by stakeholders in both the developed and the developing world. So I have high hopes for this meeting here. And once again, I'm grateful to be able to join you this morning.
Thanks a lot for that, John. Excellent to have you. I'll just share my screen here, 1 sec. Sorry for that. I'm looking for my advocacy screen to share. All right, let's try that. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Perfect.
Perfect.
Great. So what are we hoping to achieve in the next 90 minutes? What would we like you to take away from this meeting, this meetup on advocacy? We'd like everyone to go away with maybe some new insights on the importance of professionalizing advocacy, what it means to professionalize advocacy, and maybe some ways for how to go about it. So we have the resources to do advocacy work. We have a certain way that we have been doing advocacy in the past, but maybe there's a way that we can look a little bit beyond that. And, with these 6 elements, this theory of change in the second point, we can have other ideas about how to design our advocacy interventions and what could be the steps for after we've done the classic advocacy approach to keep it going. And then really, this is to have an opportunity, have open sharing. What are some of the ideas that you have for advocacy? If you have something you'd like to ask, not only about the 6 elements or how you can use them to design your advocacy project, or maybe you have an idea that you'd like to bounce off of the colleagues here, and we can take advantage of John's presence. So these are the real takeaway aims for this next 90 minutes. If you have questions as we go, you can definitely drop them in the chat room, but we'll be stopping periodically to check in, get your reflections, get your inputs, and also hear your questions. So at that time, you can also unmute yourselves and ask some questions. We're not such a big group today, so I think we can manage it like that, but let's see how we go. So with that, the first thing we wanted to do was to have an exchange where we hear about an experience from the consortium that happened some time ago, an advocacy effort. And for this, we're going to draw on the knowledge and the involvement of our colleague Ramesh Bohara in Nepal to talk about an experience, but actually it's going to be a dialogue. So John's going to be in discussion with Ramesh, and he's going to be interviewing him. And so we can all just kind of sit back and enjoy the interview and then see what we glean from this exchange. So with that, I'd like to pass off to John and to Ramesh to start the discussion. Thank you.
John, thank you. Hey, Ramesh, can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Hey, super. Well, good morning, good afternoon to you.
Good morning.
And first of all, I want to thank you, Ramesh, for being able and willing to tell your story to this large group here. Advocacy is not always pretty. There's an American movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And what I hope we can do in the next 10 or so minutes here is to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of your advocacy efforts in the WASH space. So let's start with the first of the 6 key elements, which is what I call the message or the demand or the request. So in your advocacy effort, what was the challenge or the issue, the problem to be solved? And as importantly, what was the request? What was the solution? What were you as an advocate asking your interlocutors, your targets to do to solve this problem? Over to you, Ramesh.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, John. Basically, during phase 2, like in phase 3, consortium worked in schools, healthcare facilities, as well as in communities. And now here I am talking about the MHM, menstrual hygiene management intervention in schools, basically. And challenges when we talk about, actually menstrual hygiene management is a huge challenging issue in the context of Nepal. There exist many ill beliefs, socio-cultural ill beliefs, I would say, in society, which prevent women to even do their normal daily life, activities during their menstruation periods. In other words, basically, it's a so deep-rooted sort of socio-cultural taboo. It's very difficult to break it. Yeah. To some extent, to address this issue, consortium partners during its phase 2 in the context of Nepal, basically, they launched some advocacy initiatives at various government levels. When I say various, this is district level, regional level, and then the national level as such. So briefly talking, at district level, the more focus was on to include the MHM content in school level curriculums, starting right from the grade 4 onwards. That was the district level sort of advocacy initiative. Going a bit above at the regional and national level, it was basically to somehow compile the lessons from the ground and take those lessons to the national MHM policy draft, as an input, as an essential input. So these two objectives basically was considered for this advocacy initiatives. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Ramesh. And I think it's important to underscore the challenges when one is dealing not with hardware but with software, with behavior change.
Yeah.
And the problems are local, and in my experience, the solutions have to be local. The decision-making process needs to be as, let's say, decentralized as possible. So it sounds like you're on the right track here with the MHM challenge and solutions. Now, the second key element is of course the targets. Who is responsible for increasing access, in this case, to menstrual hygiene management? So who were the targets of your intervention or your advocacy campaign? Who are the individuals or the organizations that you needed to influence to accomplish your advocacy goals?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Actually, at the district level, it was mainly the government district authorities, because, as I said, we were focusing mainly on the school level curriculum. So district level government authorities and mainly the district school curriculum development and amendments committee, that will be in all the districts. So these were the kind of key targets at the district level, whereas at the national and regional level, it was the national level ministries like health ministry, education ministry, and then water supply and sanitation ministries. These three ministries and their respective departments at the central level, as well as their respective directorates at the regional level. They were the targets. Yeah. We targeted them.
Yeah, thank you. Did you consider any outreach to the private sector for this MHM effort?
Actually, whatever we, organized sort of events like workshop, then campaigns, actually private sector as well as the non-governmental organizations, key players in the sector, they all were part of it. But as I said, I mean, school level curriculum amendments and then national policy, sort of insertions, they are basically in hands of the government authorities. That's why our prime targets were the government authorities, because we have to reach to that point. But of course, I mean, we need support from all sectors, and of course, they were together. Yeah.
Right. Perfect. Thank you, Ramesh. I think it's important to be open, to be creative, to think about targets that we might not think about in the initial design phase. So the third key element is, if you have the message or the request and you have the targets for that request, the third key element is the messenger. And by that, I mean simply who will deliver that request to those targets. So who was the right person or the right organizations that you chose to, let's say, empower to deliver this message? Was it you? Was it somebody else? Who was the messenger, and how did that relationship build between the messenger and the target?
As I said before, like this is based on the intervention, school level interventions regarding menstrual hygiene management. So actually, one of the consortium partners, that is Swiss Red Cross, was implementing in few districts. The district names like Dang is a famous district, I would say, for this, particularly this initiative. And then Rolpa is the next district. So these two districts are one of the partners, that is Swiss Red Cross, was actively involved. So they were supporting some 15 schools regarding this MHM. So school management committees, parents, teachers, association members, teachers themselves were the key messengers. Of course, supported by consortium, partners also, but they were the main, leading sort of messengers who took this message to these two target points, like as I said, district level as well as regional and national level, targets. Yeah.
So it sounds like the messengers were a combination of local stakeholders and international stakeholders. Did you design that sort of consciously, or did that just happen because of who came to meetings?
But no, basically, I mean, while organizing this sort of events like national level workshop or regional level workshop seminars, we have to design that way. It should be designed that way, because local level stakeholders are the key, because they come from the local areas and they do have local knowledge. Therefore, we always consider such resources and resourceful persons to be there on board. So this was really designed basically.
Now, the messenger question, the third of these elements, might seem like a small thing, but we say that people do business with people. People do business with people they trust. So the messenger question, is actually, all 6 of these key elements are certainly vital. But do you remember the early stages of this, when you were first bringing messengers together with the targets? Do you have a sense, do you remember how those first interactions went? Was there already a trusted relationship between the 2 or more parties, or did you have to build that trust and take a longer period of time to make progress?
There was a really well built trust between the targets and the messengers, because, as I said, this school management committee, members, they are kind of elite persons from the society. They are well sort of reputed persons, and people know them in a way. So therefore they are given that sort of responsibility to manage a school. Managing a school is a very, very sort of it's a prestigious kind of task. Therefore, these school management committee members and parents teachers association members and teachers themselves, people, they know them well, and when they approach these government authorities with this issue of advocacy, they were basically well received and well sort of responded. And
Okay.
it made consortium partners also very easy to move together with with them. Yeah, that was our yeah.
Okay, interesting and encouraging. And Ramesh, this is we have a two-way street between me and you here. So let me tell you a very brief story about an experience I had with a messenger for WASH advocacy in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
My organization was going to give an award to thank a very senior member of the U.S. Congress for his support for WASH. And so we had prepared a very nice glass award for him with his name on it. Chairman Hal Rogers was his name.
Mm-hmm.
And then I asked his staff, he doesn't know me. I'm not the right person to give him this award to thank him. But who would he like to get this award from? Who does he trust? And his staff told me, well, he really likes Rotary International.
Okay.
There's a lot of Rotarians in his district, in his state of Kentucky. So I asked the president of Rotary International to give him his award. Now, they didn't know each other, but because of Rotary, there was already that trust there.
Yes.
So Bill Boyd gave Chairman Rogers his award, and Chairman Rogers enjoyed the meeting. It was a 5-minute meeting we scheduled. They talked for 30 minutes about WASH. and then also about horses, I have to be honest. So it wasn't just about wash, but it was at the end of 30 minutes, it was a friend talking to a friend, not a stranger
Nice.
talking to a stranger. So I think the trusted relationship of the messenger to the target that you've outlined there is one of the keys of this conversation.
No, that's true. That's very true. Yes,
Uh,
I fully agree. And here also, as I said, there are some professions like, as I said, this voluntary professions, basically school management committee members, they are volunteer basically by nature. So such professions are well reputed, well perceived by the society. Therefore, they are very much accepted. So this
Perfect.
was very good sort of experience for us.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Ramesh. Now, I feel a little weird asking the timing question. The fourth key element of advocacy is timing. When is or when was the right time for you to set this in action, to deliver the request on this problem?
Mhm.
And I feel awkward because the timing, of course, is now.
Yeah.
We have billions of people, even in 2021, living without safe drinking water, living without sanitation facilities, living without hand washing stations. So the timing is always right. But
Yeah.
is the timing always right? How did you time your campaign in phase 2 here? And was that a good or a bad decision?
Yeah, well, thanks. It was basically in 2017, uh, government of Nepal planned to formulate a national menstrual hygiene management policy in 2017. So that was the plan of the government, and we come to know it. And then we immediately discussed and somehow wanted to bring our ground lessons, learnings to this national policy draft. So we started this in 2017, beginning of 2017 itself. Right somewhere, if I remember, somewhere from last week of January to February. That time we organized all these events mostly, and because somewhere from March onwards, this draft policy was to start formulating. Therefore, we thought and we considered this as right time to bring our experience and to provide some sort of inputs that we learned from the school, from our, what we say, evidence that we created at the field level. Actually, that was based on the evidence that we created at the field level in schools that we wanted to take up to the policy drafting committee. Okay, look, these are our lessons. Please include these in the national policy. So that time we thought the right time is in 2017.
Yeah, good. So it's always the right time, but there are better right times, I think. And one of my faults as a professional advocate is I lack patience. And maybe I'm in the wrong business, but but the timing is key because you can't approach a target every day. When one is approaching a target, you have to ask for what you want them to do, but the ask needs to be something that they want to do, or you have to be able to convince them that this is important for their work as well. Now, in healthcare facilities, for example, a healthcare facility is not a healthcare facility without WASH. So many leaders of healthcare facilities acknowledge that and welcome the assistance from the WASH community. Same with the school. If you're a school principal and you want more girls in your school, then you should welcome the assistance of the WASH community on MHM, on water, on gender disaggregated sanitation facilities, and so on. Sometimes that's the case, and those are very welcome conversations. Other times that's not the case. And in those events, then the timing becomes particularly important Maybe this needs to be timed with a budget process at the school. And the ask needs to be to the principal to include a line for MHM in next year's budget or something like that. So I also think that the timing is very important, not from my perspective or your perspective, Ramesh, but from the perspective of the target.
That's true.
And
Yes.
it seems like you have been, you're doing a good job of advising the Swiss Water and Sanitation Consortium and its membership on exactly that issue. The fifth key element is the platform. And by that, I simply mean what type, what flavor of communications efforts are the most appropriate for any given advocacy campaign. It could be a grassroots, sort of bottom-up advocacy campaign. It could be a high-level advocacy campaign involving one or two very senior people having a very quiet conversation, and so on. But what was your approach? What type of communications efforts were most helpful beyond what you've already shared with us?
Yeah. Well, as I said before, like we organized several events of workshops, basically at the district level, at regional, and then national level. So, as said before, I mean, district level workshops were mainly focused for the school level curriculum. And two districts, I also pronounced before, two districts, Dang and Rolpa, they decided to include menstrual hygiene management contained in their one subject, which is a regular subject. They call it health and physical education. So it starts from grade 4 itself, health and physical education. So insertion of MHM elements, which are very important and necessary for a student to learn, they somehow agreed and decided to include in the curriculum. And with help of the experts, and of course consortium was always there, so they compiled all the content, they finalized it in the shape of booklet. And then this booklet was published with financial support from consortium. So we published booklets, and very interestingly, I mean, as I said before, Swiss Red Cross was working there in 15 schools, but now all the government schools, they decided to, start this new amended curriculum in all schools, in both the districts. When I say all schools, in Dang, there were 909 schools at that time, and 632 schools in Rolpa. By saying that, is 1,500 plus schools where this MHM reached, basically, with this small sort of initiative that we started, I would say. Though it's not, I cannot claim that it was all because of us, but we tried to somehow turn a small stone on the way, So it was a sort of encouraging achievement that that many number of schools, they started teaching MHM content course already, and that was the case of district level. And then regional level, as I said, we invited all these high-level stakeholders, right, from the representative from ministries, departments, directorates, and in Dang district, basically, we organized one large, sort of 2 days long workshop. And there we tried to somehow agree on some essential elements of MHM that needs to be included in the policy, draft. So after rigorous discussion, I would say for 2 days, as an outcome, we have been able to agree 15 points, these agreements, and we named it as Dang Declaration. So this 15-point Dang Declaration was then presented to the national level seminar later on. And then these were handed over to the draft policy formulation committee to include them. So somehow I would say, I mean, at each level, what we have been able to do in terms of this advocacy, I think all consortium partners were quite happy with that.
Mhm.
And
Great.
that was, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ramesh. And I have one final question for you, but I want to come back to 2 points you just made at some point in this conversation. The first point is in Dang, 990 schools. In Dolpa, 662 schools.
632 and 900.
630, right. So
Yeah.
the number is important, but the point I want to make is that that is 100%.
Yes.
That is the SDGs in action. That is reaching the
Exactly,
SDG goal
exactly,
of 100%
Yes.
via advocacy. I want to get back to that 100%, the SDGs here momentarily. The second thing you said, I've written down your quote, is you can't claim it was all because of us.
Yes.
And that's an important comment to make. It's impossible to make that claim, and you don't want to make that claim, in my opinion.
Yes.
Part of my job is to make sure that everybody else gets the credit, and that's part of the magic, and it's very, very difficult to do. So I'm glad that you are upfront with that. And that's also very important for your other stakeholders to know, and it's very important for donors, if there is external support for your work, to know and to really understand. So the last of these 6 steps, Ramesh, is simply the follow-up. And an ongoing concern is that unless those voices are being heard locally, then progress will slow or stop, or all of a sudden schools will not have menstrual hygiene products, for example. So what actions were taken, or what actions have you taken to make sure that those voices continue to be heard, continue to speak out in favor of a continuation of this positive step forward?
Yes, that is very important point, basically, John. Thank you for that. During this whole, exercise, what we realized is the structures that are in place at the schools, like these school management committees and parent teachers associations, and of course teachers themselves and student boys, girls, because this is it's an issue not only associated with the girls, it's also the equally important issue for the boys. They should also equally participate in this. Then only we can move in the direction of eradication. Now the thing is, these structures, whatever are in place, or institutions, let's say, whatever are in place, we believe that they will continue it in these 2 districts at least, but not limited. Not only that, they will also somehow take it to their neighboring districts. And as they have various I would say formal platforms also, like teachers, they have national teachers associations where they meet once or twice a year, and they share their own experience from one to another. And similarly, there are some formal and informal platforms for school management committees also to meet at some point of, same for PTAs. So we believe that these people who have done such a excellent, job with their own involvement will definitely, take it outside also and maintain it within themselves. That was our belief. But I must tell you that we started this beginning of the 2017, and it took quite a long, and December 17 was our end of the phase. So yes, in that sense, we could not do much. At least what we should have also done, if time permitted, then at least some sort of structures in the community level also, because as I said in the beginning, I mean, there are many sort of, taboos still. So
Sure.
how to sort of address those? We were not able to do much regarding the community level, but school level, of course, I mean, we believe these committees who are there will keep it up and will also spread around.
Super. Thank you, Ramesh. Yeah, 3 years without. It might be interesting to go back now and
Oh
see
yes,
what the
yes,
status is.
definitely. I would love to do that,
Yeah.
but let's see how it goes.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Okay, I thank you, Ramesh, for your openness in sharing the good and the bad and the ugly of this effort. And John, I'm inclined to hand back over to you now. I have a lot of follow-up questions for Ramesh, but please, over to you.
Thanks a lot, John and Ramesh. This has been a great way to start off the discussion. This is just the warm-up. So what we can do right now, I think in just a minute, we'll open it up in case others on the call have reflections about what they've heard and maybe questions, something they'd like to know a little bit more before handing back to John for a keynote. But before opening it up, I mean, from your discussion, many insights have come. Just a few that I noted were that when we're working with changing a mindset or changing a behavior, the problems are local. So we have to be designing the solutions at the local level. When we're implementing an advocacy initiative, it's important to be open. Maybe we designed a certain strategy with the advocacy, but as we're going, we see that we need to consider other targets or influencing others. So we have to be open to adapting to that situation while we're implementing. John made a statement that people do business with people they trust. So that the messenger having the trust of the target is important, and how to bring about that scenario for maximum impact. The timing, obviously, it has to be right. If we want to get the target person to do what we'd like them to do, we have to make sure that the person is open to it, or that the organization is willing to do it. And so finding the right time to make that effort is really key. The platform, whether it's going to be local, bottom up, or it's going to be a high level, that has to be decided. And in many cases, like this case that you've shared, Ramesh, it was both local level and national level. Exactly. So we have to consider various kinds of communication efforts that are most helpful for both of those. Very important to make sure that the local voice continues to be heard beyond the intervention. So what do we need to do to set up a supportive atmosphere so that that can continue beyond the life of whatever advocacy initiative we have? And finally, I was really impressed by this exchange about, we're not aiming to claim that we're to be credited with this achievement. It's not about taking credit, and that the best recipe is that everyone else gets the credit. So with that, the floor is open. If anyone would like to raise a hand or unmute yourself and make some comments or reflections or questions, let's take a few minutes for that. Thank you.
May I add one small point? Just
Sure, Ramesh.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Just 1 minute. Actually, we initiated this advocacy through the Global Advocacy Fund also that time, because this Global Advocacy Fund was started in phase 2 in a small scale, basically. And there were 3 implementing partners, basically that time, consortium partners in Nepal, the Swiss Red Cross, then TDH and Helvetas. All 3, they joined hands to advocate this issue. Yeah. So this was through Global Advocacy Fund, and 3 partners jointly, advocated that small sort of intervention, what was done in the schools.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for that. There is a power in this consortium, the potential of it, and whether or not you are a member with a phase 3 project or not. So definitely there's some teaming up that can happen. So just one last ask, if there's any hands raised or anyone would like to ask a question. Maybe something went in the chat box, but I missed it. Is anything there?
Nothing there and no hands raised, John.
Okay, so if that's the case, John, I'd like to hand it back to you to really take us through again these 6 key elements. And we have a slide for support. If you can see the screen, is it showing?
It sure is. Yep.
Yep, perfect. You can go to presentation mode. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Okay, perfect. So, and I hope and I encourage the members here to grill me, to ask me the difficult questions, to ask Ramesh the difficult questions. There were a few things in his storytelling there that are clearly there's more work to be done, or there's more follow-up to be done. So please, as I'm going through here, this is a keynote presentation, but I'll just take 10, probably 15 minutes here, and very much welcome your questions and comments and suggestions afterwards. So thank you, first of all, again, for the opportunity to be here. I think that the dire lack of WASH is a global development challenge for which the Swiss Water and Sanitation Consortium is perfectly situated. This is a very serious problem. It is also a very solvable problem, and it's what I call pre-critical mass. There are not enough people paying attention and acting on the WASH problem yet in any country, and certainly including the United States here. So, but my bottom line is that at some point in human history, everybody's going to have safe, affordable, and sustainable WASH. At some point in time, every mother who gives birth in a maternity ward is going to have access to WASH. At some point in human history, there's going to be a hand washing station available to every doctor, every nurse, every patient, every family member in a healthcare facility, including those with physical and intellectual disabilities. You know, at some point in time, every schoolgirl is going to be carrying books instead of dirty water on her head. So all I'm talking about is the date. All I'm talking about is when, not if these things will happen. When, not if, we will achieve 100%. And I think that you, each of you as a member of this consortium, hopefully can play a bigger role in accelerating progress, in bringing that 100% goal closer to today. So my vision, or my ambition, is that each of you can integrate advocacy into your work in the WASH sector. And I would propose that by doing so, by including advocacy in your work, you're going to be solving problems at one scale, at let's say a programmatic scale, and you will potentially get other problems solved on a much bigger scale. And I'll provide some more detail about what that could mean. Now, advocates aren't, however, always on the front lines. They're not necessarily perceived as doers, and most of you are more technical. Most of you are doers, but advocates are often behind the scenes. They're making phone calls. They are taking taxis to meetings. They're buying cups of coffee. But advocacy, as quiet as it sometimes is, has tremendous upside. It can give each of us more opportunities to increase the scale, and the scope, and the sustainability of your work in Washington, in institutions, and far beyond. And I think that Ramesh's story is a good testament to that. So, you know, when I'm reading about ways to accelerate progress, to go from this to this sort of a curve with respect to the SDGs, you know, I think of words like influence and social mobilization and education and organization. I think less about the technical aspects, you know, the size of the pipe, the model of the hand pump, and so on. I think that the challenge for us, the opportunity for us as advocates, is to figure out what we can influence, what processes we can help to accelerate, and then figure out how to do that. And that's what I wanted to briefly talk about today. So, the problem or the opportunity is this: at the rate we're going, again, it's this sort of a curve. We are decades away from solving the world's water challenges. I think we all know this. More of the same answers will result only in more of the same important but unforgivably slow progress. This will not get us to the SDGs. This will get us to the SDGs and their 100% goals by 2030. And this is why I do advocacy. This is where advocacy comes into play. How can we best use our voices? How can we best use our trusted relationships? How can each of you channel those voices to influence public policy, to accelerate public-private partnerships, to increase budgets for WASH? And if you are successful in doing this, I think from the conversation so far, you all have a general sense of the potential outcomes. But just let me share with you a very, very partial list of potential outcomes that I've seen in my experience. One example: every parliament in every country should have a WASH caucus. Every province, every state at subnational levels, a group of members of parliament who are dedicated to advocating for WASH within that parliament, within their countries. And the fact is, we need one of those in the US Senate in Washington, DC right now. So if anybody can help on that, let's collaborate. Secondly, increased financial resources, domestic financial resources for WASH. In the WASH budget, in the health budget, a line item for WASH in the education budget. Those are potential outcomes. More programmatically, a potential outcome of advocacy efforts is hand washing stations in every school, in every healthcare facility, in every marketplace to combat COVID, and as importantly, more importantly, to prevent the next infectious disease from going pandemic. Your voices, your trusted voices, could lead to better targeted, more, let's say, pro-poor government subsidies, more government subsidies targeted at the poorest, the most marginalized communities in your countries. And it's important to say, this is a very partial list, and there are many other ideas, better ideas, coming from your local contexts that I, from Washington, DC, am poorly placed to identify, much less accomplish. So what Ramesh was saying about sort of making decisions local, I can't overemphasize the importance of that. So what I've done, I've taken 12 years of advocacy work, I've put them into 6 key elements and 15 minutes here. Now, I won't walk through each step again in detail, but the key here is just to start cooking, to take this recipe and make it your own, customize it for your own context. So again, the first of those 6 key elements is the request, the demand that you're making. Are you asking for help for additional budgets? Or do you want the existing budgets to be used better, to be better targeted at the most marginalized rural or schools in informal settlements? There's a lot of different ways to come up with the right request. It seems like a very simple thing, what should we ask for? But it does require thought. You need to be certain that you are advocating for the right solution. And each of these 6 steps is vital. None of them work without each of the others. But the request, the demand, I put first for a reason. We each need to advocate for the right thing, or else we're wasting time and money. Secondly, as Ramesh and I have discussed, are the targets of this outreach. Whose job is it to ensure WASH access? Is it an elected official? Is it the administrator of a healthcare facility or a school system? And again, there were a lot of different answers to that question based on what the demand is, what the request is. Now, my advice is one needs to think about the right answer, the correct answer to this question. Who's the right target? And sometimes the answer might be obvious, the finance minister. But also think about where your trusted relationships are. Do you have a personal trusted relationship with a particular target? Would your work with that relationship be more effective than sending an introductory message to the finance minister who doesn't know you? So it's a tricky balancing act between sort of the right target, the correct target, and those trusted relationships that you as an individual, as a representative of your organization, bring to the game. And with regards to targets, of course, especially with politicians, it's a good idea, and I've learned this the hard way, to place multiple bets, as we say, to engage with multiple targets. Now, the third key element is the messenger or messengers. Who's the right person to deliver this message? Sometimes literally a piece of paper. Who's the right person to make that request of the target? Now here it's less about you. It's less about me. It's not about me. It's about the target. Whose voice does that target respect? Who does she or he trust and listen to? If it is you, super, problem solved. If it's not you, and in most cases it's not, your role as an advocate is not necessarily to be that messenger, but rather to identify the messenger and then equip, enable, empower her or him to deliver that message. Now, what is that messenger? Well, it could be a political leader, it could be a business executive, it could be a civic or faith leader. It could be as we've heard, a local or international NGO, or some mix of all of these. Don't limit your thinking just to one messenger, of course. The timing, when's the right time to make this request? And I've already given you the right answer. The timing is always right. And I'm being a little facetious with that. But it's not really a joke. The timing is always right for increased advocacy efforts for WASH, for health, or education. There are serious problems to be solved. My sense is that the timing is particularly good right now to be more ambitious in responding to COVID, to be more ambitious in our asks for hand washing stations, for increased WASH line items in budgets at different levels, in health budgets in particular. The timing might be right in your country to align this advocacy work with a budget cycle or an electoral process. The key here, timing-wise, is to be flexible, I think be creative, be prepared for surprises, for obstacles, and to keep with it. There's not just one right time. The fifth key element is the platform, and I think that Ramesh was pretty clear about, is it a grassroots effort starting from the bottom up? Is it top down with a very quiet conversation with one member of parliament? Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Instead of students in the streets or one member of parliament, maybe you're working with the local school boards. Maybe you're working with the local nursing association or midwives association. There's a lot of different, what I call platforms or communications efforts. There's a lot of different vectors through which to channel these messages. And then finally is the follow-up. And this, I probably should make this first, although it doesn't quite fit to have follow-up be the first thing. This is absolutely vital. So what actions can you take to ensure that your work long outlives any particular advocacy campaign? What actions can you take to make sure that those local voices continue to be heard, continue to speak out, continue to be listened to long after any specific project? Real progress, significant progress doesn't happen in 12, 24-month increments. So what can you do as a voice for WASH to ensure continuity, to ensure sustainability, to ensure accountability? So in every remarks that I make, I always give homework assignments. So your homework assignment is the same as mine. Tomorrow morning, it's start cooking. Start integrating advocacy into your programs. Use this recipe. Take this recipe, customize it for your own efforts based on your own programming within your organizations and within your own political context. Have a cup of coffee tomorrow morning with one of your potential targets. Plan a visit to a healthcare facility or to a school. Talk about what the request is. And an even better idea is to invite the mayor, your friend the mayor, your friend the city councilwoman, to that meeting with you, to tour a healthcare facility with you, and then work together with her or him to develop that plan. I will share with you after this session a number of resources that I think would be helpful, and happy to continue this dialogue with any or all of you. The bottom line for me is that this is, WASH is a good opportunity. It is a good cause. It's not a 50-50 sort of an issue. Everybody is for WASH. Every political leader in the world wants every one of their citizens to benefit from WASH. There is political will. There is, however, a lack of leadership, a lack of follow through, a lack of constant messaging, constant advocacy about WASH and its linkages to health and to education. So your job is simply to create the opportunity for you and other stakeholders to identify the problems, identify the solutions, bring people together, and then accelerate progress far beyond your individual programming and far beyond the current rate of progress that the world is making. So I'm inspired by this convening. I'm inspired by the potential of each of you to become that trusted voice for WASH in your communities, and very much hope to be able to lend a hand as you continue to grow this global advocacy fund. So thanks again for the opportunity to join you this morning.
Thank you so much, John. That really drove home these 6 different points. I'd like to hear from the participants.
Me too.
This resonates strongly with us, but what do you think? Any questions, any reflections on what John has been sharing and Ramesh previously?
Yeah, I actually have a question. This is Bridget here. I'm just wondering if I understood correctly. Did you say projects should consider having multiple targets and multiple messengers before? And can you explain this more from your experience, John?
Bridget, yeah, great question. And I will ask Ramesh for his response to this. And also I'd like to hear it from others. There's a difference between strategy and strategic capacity. And by that, I mean, we have our 5-year strategy and we want to follow that as closely as possible. But more importantly is strategic capacity, the ability to be flexible, to be creative, to roll with the punches, as we say. If your first target doesn't get reelected, do you have a problem? If you have a problem, you're doing advocacy wrong. And I've made that mistake a lot of times. But who's your next target? In any parliament, there's going to be 2, 3, 5, 20 political parties, some in power, some in the opposition. That's just one example. Another example is if you're trying to influence the public sector, maybe the private sector voice is key. Maybe the voice of a social entrepreneur is key, either as the target or as the messenger. So this is, advocacy is not a science, I would suggest, even though I try to be scientific about it. It is an art, and you never really know what the right answer is going to be. One other distinction that I'd make quickly is the distinction between political leadership and civil servants, the distinction between elected officials and administrators, who are sometimes more technical experts in WASH, in health, in education, and so on. And I would advise that one consider targets in both spaces, both elected leaders and then the administrators who will be around for sometimes 10, 20 years under 5 or 6 different elected political leadership. So I hope that's a start to answering your very good question, Brigitte.
Yeah,
Ramesh,
thanks a lot. Yeah, so that your advocacy does not stand on only one leg, in fact, so that you have several legs to stand on. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot.
Right, sure. Yeah, Ramesh or others in the consortium, over to you guys.
Thanks very much, John. Basically, I think you have covered, you have already elaborated the questions he asked. So I'm very much with you. Thank you.
I wonder, do other folks around the virtual table here have answers to Brigitte's question as well? In your advocacy efforts, internal within your own organizations, or in this consortium here, have you chosen one target? Have you chosen multiple targets, or are you just getting started in the design phase of your advocacy efforts now?
Okay,
Well,
maybe just,
we know that there's a few proposals that have been either reflected on or in the process of being designed, and a couple have been submitted. Might some of those proposals and colleagues that are behind them like to say a few words as well? This is quite open.
I think Lakshman maybe raised his hand.
Okay, great.
Did I see correctly, Lakshman? Please just unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I did. I have a question which is related to a proposal which we have developed and submitted to consortium. It is related to number 1, message. And the question is what is the difference between issue to be solved and what is needed to be done. Actually, in our proposal, we are very clear about the issue to be solved, because that is a well-known issue in the sector and very difficult one, everyone knows. But so we developed our proposal around the issue to be solved, because we are pretty sure that is a very hot topic. But when it comes to what is needed to be done, so we have proposed in a way so that we explore what needed to be done within the proposal itself. So we have developed our proposal that way. Is this a normal way? Or is it okay this way?
John Brogan, my sense is that maybe you or somebody can answer that from a consortium standpoint, and then I'll answer it more broadly.
may I just quickly respond to this? Because I have looked their proposal. I have basically suggested also a few points, and the proposal now finally is very much in line with these 6 points, because I suggested them to take into account these 6 points. That was my first sort of comment to, or let's say suggestions to the team, like please consider these 6 points in elaborating your proposal. So finally, when I looked at that, and I find it largely, somehow, in line to those 6 points. Therefore, to my opinion, that is fine. But John, you can add, yeah.
Thanks, Ramesh. Well, not knowing the details, I'm excited to discover it yet. Lakshman, it's a fundamental question you ask. What's needed to be done? I would say that your clarity on the situation, yourself, the partners, whatever you feel is the best way forward is the best chance we have. And even if it's not the right one, if you're looking at it as the project is starting to get going and you keep ideating on it and reflecting on it, there may be other adjustments to be made as you go. So, I mean, knowing the teams in the consortium and knowing how involved and plugged in they are to the situations, I would tend to think whatever collectively you've figured out is what's needed to do as a solution is a great place to start. And from that, you can continue to explore it and look deeper into it. John Oldfield, over to you.
Thank you, John. And beyond the focus on the problem, I need to rephrase this question, I think, in the 6 key elements, because what I'd like to see in the message or request category is maybe 1/3, here's the problem, and 2/3, here is the one or more requests or demands or solutions that we're going to ask for from our targets through our messengers. Obviously, this is all built on a foundation of here's the problem, but an advocacy campaign needs to acknowledge that, needs to be driven by that evidence. But in designing an advocacy campaign, the key is, how are you going to use advocacy to solve that problem? So the problem is a thing. There aren't enough girls in school. Okay, how do you solve that? What are you asking your targets to do? And I enjoy reading through proposals that are that include the gravity of the problem, but more importantly, include some creative thinking about how to use our voices to accelerate progress towards the solutions. So I've actually somewhat poorly phrased that question and maybe misled some folks. I'm taking the problem almost for granted. We have a problem here. I can figure that out from Washington, D.C. in many cases. I cannot figure out what the right advocacy solutions are. So Lakshman, you've asked a better question than you might have realized. And I hope it deserves a very good answer, and I hope you get one day.
Yeah, I got the answer as far as it is related to our project. Yeah, it can be done because we can explore the needs as well in the process, like John says sometimes, but the point is that we remain open if it is a difficult one. So that's the answer, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lakshman. And maybe you get to a certain point, but it brings you to a point where other opportunities open up. And that's maybe the element of advocacy, which I feel has a bit of magic to it, because you might not foresee the contacts or the potentials that can come from taking that first few steps. So thanks so much for that. Kawisa Yulbe, thank you for your question. In the chat room, what is the best advocacy type to ensure sustainability of the advocacy intervention? Great question. John was talking before about maybe the follow-up should come first. We need to think about that supportive structure. Would anyone like to take that question? Either John, Ramesh, or anyone else on the chat.
Hey, John, why don't I get us started here with a very brief answer to this? You know, that is the sustainability question. That is the follow-up question. And my answer is, a very simple answer is on day one. Well, let me phrase it as a question. You're working in a local community to get WASH in healthcare facilities. When do you invite the mayor of that local community to participate? Do you invite her to the ribbon cutting ceremony, as most people do, and have her cut the ribbon for the new sanitation block? Okay, that's a good idea. A better idea to ensure sustainability of the advocacy is to invite her to day one of the design phase. You know, that gets to that, have a cup of coffee tomorrow morning with the mayor and tour a healthcare facility, tour a school. So the best advocacy type to ensure sustainability of the advocacy intervention, Kawisa's question, is advocacy that makes other people owners of the advocacy effort. The mayor shows up to the school or the healthcare facility. She owns that process now. She is a part of that dialogue from day one. She doesn't just get to show up for the photo opportunity and the ribbon cutting ceremony. So bring your targets in as early as possible and sustain your efforts. Keep inviting the mayor for progress reports at the school, at the healthcare facility. So that's one quick simplified answer to the question.
Thanks, John. Ramesh, in your experience that you shared, would you have done something differently to create that sort of supportive atmosphere so that there's sustainability?
Actually, as I mentioned, I mean, in our discussion, these institutions, or let's say structures at schools, because during design itself, it was somehow, foreseen that these structures will remain forever in the schools, and they will continue it. By saying that, they were involved, like John said just before, like they were involved right from the beginning, the day one itself. So school management committees were involved, parents teachers association members were involved, teachers were involved from day one itself. And then that's the point where we believed while we plan to exit from there, we believe that they will continue it because of that. So I fully agree with that. Yes.
Nice, thank you. I see in the chat room, East Africa is getting a little warm. So good to see that there'll be some collaboration and common ideation together. David, you asked a question about if advocacy can be done as a single intervention, kind of by itself, or does it require also having the project having its own experience in what it's doing in order to advocate for it? That's a very good question. John Oldfield, in your experience, have you seen one or the other, or a combination works best?
Yeah, if David is able and willing to unmute and provide a little more detail there, I'd like to understand the question better. David, is that possible, or should I just quickly respond with what I think is an answer?
Yeah, thank you very much. Why I'm asking this question is usually when advocacy is done, and probably you're working with the local government as maybe people that you're targeting to deliver the message to. But I think it has always been having difficulties in terms of stakeholders wanting to see the tangible, interventions that go hand in hand with advocacy. They look at advocacy as, well, something that may not benefit the community, but they want things done. For example, if you're talking about providing clean water to the community because they are having problems. So when you are advocating for that, they would want you to demonstrate what is that you're talking about, So it becomes a challenge in terms of implementing the software where maybe the government officials are interested in the hardware. Thank you.
Yeah, boy, good, good question. And let me try to quickly, and thank you for elaborating, David. You are in an interesting spot. I think most of the people on this call are in an interesting spot because, I, for example, only do advocacy. I don't do programming. So I can't take people to a tour of a healthcare facility where I've put a wash installation in there. So on the one hand, you have an advantage in that while you're doing your advocacy, you can also show them the progress you're making on hardware, on software, on behavior change, and so on. So, and of course, everybody likes to see that. On the other hand, I would suggest, my advocacy is independent. I advocate on behalf of the issue, on behalf of the sector. I advocate on behalf of anybody doing good, sustainable work in the WASH space. As you consider ways to integrate advocacy into your programming, into your own individual implementing organization, there's a difficult balancing act there. How much are you advocating for your particular approach, for your particular projects, for your organization's name and brand and reputation? And how much are you advocating for the issue at hand? How much of a pure WASH advocate can you be while you are working at an individual organization? And this, for John Brogan and colleagues at the consortium, this is a tricky balancing act that you guys need to work out. Ramesh says, we can't and we shouldn't take credit for the advocacy outcomes alone. We have to share the credit. We have to share the work. So, David, I guess let me answer your question very briefly in another way. Yes, every target of your advocacy wants to see progress. So if you're advocating with a local elected official or a member of parliament, yes, invite them to day one of the design phase so that you build a better advocacy campaign. Then invite them a standing meeting every 3 months, come back to the school, and we're going to show you the progress we're making. And then a year later, there's gender disaggregated sanitation facilities. There's safe drinking water. There's MHM products in each of the girls' bathrooms. And all of a sudden, that picture is not of a well. The picture is not of a sanitation facility. All of a sudden, the mayor sees more girls in that school, and they're healthy, and they're learning, and they're comfortable in the learning environment. So the before picture might be, there's no girls in school. The after picture might not be of a very beautiful well or a hand pump. The after picture is inside a classroom filled with girls actually learning for more and more years. So I think the secret here is frequently telling stories and frequently showing your targets the progress of your and other advocacy efforts. I hope that answers your very good question, David.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thanks, John. And thanks again, David. Martin, you have your hand up, please. Please share.
Yeah, thanks, John. I was just wondering generally, a question to John Oldfield, whether or not your advocacy work with WASH over the last decade or so has focused on WASH in institutions like healthcare facilities, schools, detention centers, etc., or more at the community level, or generally? What is your focus?
The answer is yes.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Gotcha.
We have, at a previous organization called Water Advocates, we focused very much on WASH in schools. At my current organization, Global Water 2020, we focus very much on WASH in healthcare facilities, as John Brogan and others know. But throughout, we're focused on WASH and households, WASH and communities, WASH and faith organizations, WASH and civic organizations, WASH and prisons, as you say, WASH and transportation hubs. We are, again, we're sort of a unique model. We don't have a business model. We are funded by private philanthropy. So we are able, rather than pushing our own particular approach, we are able to respond. We've made several rounds. We are not a grant-making organization, but we have made several rounds of small sub-grants to advocacy partners across the globe. And all we say is these funds are for advocacy and they are for WASH. And then we've been in a very fortunate position to be able to provide financial and technical assistance across the board without having to play favorites. All are important. WASH in communities might be a bit intimidating. It's a large problem. WASH in schools, we have found, is a way to sort of chunk down, take one bite of the apple and really focus efforts on that. Same with WASH and healthcare facilities, same with WASH and the workplace. For some of our advocacy partners, they find an institutional approach more concrete, more actionable. So thank you, Martin.
Martin, was there a follow-up question on that?
No, that's good. That's clearer.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. We've come to the end of the hour, or the hour and a half that we budgeted. Are there any other burning questions? Hands up, people would like to say a few words. Brigitte, do you see anything?
There are no more hands up, John.
Okay. Well, I kind of wanted to ask John a few more questions, but I propose that we allow those to go who have to go, and those who would like to stay, maybe we just have a couple more Q&As with John. But John, could you just kind of take us home? What would you like to leave us with, especially your reflections on professionalizing advocacy, as you mentioned at the very beginning of your talk? Please go ahead.
Two quick points I'll make here, John. After thanking you and your colleagues and your collaborators here once again for the opportunity, professionalizing advocacy means doing advocacy as a profession. And I do not think that enough people get paid money to do WASH advocacy. And this is a message, this is an opportunity that I'm bringing to the philanthropic community in the US and in Northern Europe. Advocates in my experience are one of two things. They're either technical people trying to integrate advocacy into their work, or they are sort of hobbyists, neither of which is perfect. Both of which are good, neither of which is perfect. So there should be a WASH advocacy organization and network in every country, in every province, in every state, of professionals, professional advocates paid money to advocate for WASH in healthcare facilities, WASH in schools, WASH in families, and so on. So that is my frankly #1 overarching goal. And now, more philosophically, and I welcome people's ideas on that, because my work is funded in my country by a US philanthropist. Could there be Nigerian philanthropists or South African philanthropists or Ugandan philanthropists funding WASH advocacy in your countries? I would certainly like to hope so. The second and more philosophical thing I'd like to leave you with is that advocacy provides us all an opportunity to leverage our work. So if I invest 100,000 US in wells, I will get 10 wells, 15 wells, depending. If I invest $100,000 in WASH and healthcare facilities, I might get 20 sanitation blocks. If I invest $100,000 in advocacy, I could get 100 million. I could get 500 million. I could get a 1,000 to 1 return on that investment. And again, as Ramesh says, I can't take credit for this. I don't want to take credit for it. I want to work with a group of people to make the asks at the right time of the right targets. So I turn my $100,000 into hundreds of millions of dollars, whether it's my government's foreign assistance or your government's domestic public resources, financial resources. So I like advocacy because it gives me the opportunity to leverage every dollar I invest in WASH and every moment of time I invest in WASH. And I am grateful and encourage you to continue to try to integrate advocacy into your programming, which might yield results far beyond the work of any individual or organization. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here with those couple of quick closing remarks.
Thanks a lot, John. Shall we open our cameras and say goodbye, and thanks to John and Ramesh. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to receiving your proposals, and we're available to support. John's not going anywhere.
That's correct. I'm on the hook.
Thanks, John.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, John. It was really great.
Everyone.
Very
Thank
interesting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.